Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, April 11th, 2022, and today we're going to be talking about the state of New Hampshire and the 2022 governor election and the Senate election. Now, we typically don't get polls in such a large array from a swing state like New Hampshire. It's relatively small, and we see very infrequent polling from the state, the last one being March 24th, then all the way back to January 12th, and the last poll after that went back to December of 2021, and that actually had to do with the 2024 presidential election and not 2022 data. So looking at the state of New Hampshire, it definitely warrants its own video when we get such a significant amount of data from the state, especially considering that we're looking at data from Phillips Academy, which is right in the state of New Hampshire. Now, looking at the polling results, you are seeing vastly different answers from the governor election versus the Senate election. On one hand, you're being told that the Republicans are up 48 percentage points. Then in another race, the Democrats are up by 15. It's a very interesting scenario that we are in right now, but I will say that I think a lot of this comes down with, keeping in consideration and keeping in mind that these races are very different. The candidates here are very different, and New Hampshire itself is typically a swing state, so to see it move in opposite directions isn't exactly shocking when it comes down to historical context or just the state of New Hampshire as a whole as it stands today. Now, for a bit of more recent context, in the 2020 presidential election, Joe Biden won the state of New Hampshire by 7.3%. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won the state by a mere margin of 0.2%. Now, every single county in this region, in fact, most parts of the New England area, shifted towards the Democratic Party. What you're looking at specifically in the state of New Hampshire was that there were some very similar shifts across almost all the counties, 6 points, 7 points, 7 points, 6 points, back and forth between a very similar amount. The main takeaway here that New Hampshire did shift towards the left, and Joe Biden outperforms, I believe, Obama 2012 and Clinton 2016. Now, looking at the Senate election results in 2016, because that's what one of our main focuses is that the Senate election in 2016 actually was closer than the presidential election. Now, despite the Democrats losing control of the presidency, the Republican Party actually lost seats in the Senate and lost seats in the House. There were a gain of 6 seats for the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives and 2 seats in the United States Senate for the Democratic Party, with New Hampshire being one of them. Now, in this New Hampshire race, the person who defeated Kelly Ayotte was Maggie Hassan. Now, she was a former statewide elected position. I believe she was actually the incumbent governor at the time, but she essentially pivoted to the Senate election saying, my name's statewide, so why not run for Senate? And she ended up winning, but by a fraction of a percentage, winning by 0.1%, winning 17 more votes than Kelly Ayotte. Now, Kelly Ayotte, surprisingly enough, was not a weak candidate back in 2016. She won in 2010 with over 60% of the vote, and despite many other competitive swing Senate races, such as Wisconsin, Iowa, presumably Ohio, but it ended up not being. That's a discussion for another video. North Carolina, right? Florida. What you found was that these races, while originally meant to be competitive, ended up going to the GOP. Democrats had opportunities even in Missouri, and they ended up dropping the ball. Now, it's not really a shocker about Missouri, but I should say the Democratic Party probably, was expecting more out of Wisconsin, expecting more out of Pennsylvania, potentially out of the state of North Carolina. The only real victories that they had were holding on to the states of New Hampshire, Colorado, Nevada. Illinois was a pickup, but it was a pretty easy pickup because Mark Kirk, extremely unpopular, elected in a red wave, was never going to win again. Now, for the Senate election, that has been handled. We've seen the history about it in 2016, but the governor election doesn't go by terms of 6 years or even 4 years, despite other states moving in different directions when it comes down to gubernatorial terms. When you look at the governor election in the state of New Hampshire, they actually occur every 2 years. So Chris Sununu was first elected back in 2016. So looking at the governor history here, we can actually take a look at the first election for Chris Sununu. That was, I believe, 2016. I actually might be off about that. It might be 2014. Let's see. Actually, nope, it was not. So it was Maggie Hassan as the incumbent. He won in 2016, winning by 2.3%. Now, he ran against another statewide name recognized, type of candidate, but a 2.3% victory wasn't exactly, bad for Chris Sununu. He outperformed Kelly Ayotte, outperformed Donald Trump across the state. So main thing is that he was able to win despite the national environment, or at least statewide environment, not necessarily being on his side. Then you fast forward to 2018, a blue wave year, yet New Hampshire becomes even more conservative. Now, it was a blue wave year, so keep that in mind. Chris Sununu only wins by 7 percentage points, and, arguably this race was competitive for a brief period of time. He did rank in the top 10 of the most popular governors, but again, New Hampshire was in a position where they were trying to reject the Trump era, they were trying to reject any Republicans with it. You saw a 35-seat pickup for the Democratic Party across the nation in the House of Representatives, so 2018 very much much was that blue wave year for, Democrats to outperform even against popular incumbents, even though Massachusetts ended up going to Charlie Baker by 35, Larry Hogan being the third most popular governor in the entire nation, only won by about 12 percentage points. So looking at New Hampshire, it isn't exactly an anomaly to see where it is right now. But I want to point out the New Hampshire governor election in specific from 2020, because you will see just the electoral prowess that, Chris Sununu has. Despite Biden winning by 7.3%, and the Senate election going to the Democratic Party by 15.6%, the governor election went to Chris Sununu by 32 percentage points. 32 percentage points against a Democrat in a state where you saw Biden win by 7. The Senate Democrat win by 16. And the governor election goes to the Republican Party by 33 points. Chris Sununu receiving 516,000 votes. Jeanne Shaheen only received 450,000. Biden only received 424,000. Chris Sununu winning with this substantial margin was unheard of, but it was very much expected. Everyone expected this race to be safe red. I mean, it is just very impressive, I would say, for him to win by such a profound amount, which means looking at some of these numbers, you can actually start to see and piece together how he could actually be up by 38 points or potentially 48 points. My main takeaway from showing you the historical growth for Chris Sununu from 2 to 7 to 33 is that he is popular and that these numbers make sense. They can also make sense in conjunction with the numbers you're seeing above it, the Senate election that is showing the Democratic Party ahead. Chris Sununu again won when Biden won and a Senate Democrat won, which means this same thing could very well happen. Now, I do want to say that beyond this governor election result, I'm quite frankly not surprised. I'm not shocked. Chris Sununu was widely expected to win re-election. But the interesting thing about this is that Chris Sununu was expected to run for Senate. He had the perfect opportunity to do so. Has served as governor for 6 years now, and people were saying maybe he doesn't want an additional term, but obviously he does. And with that 6-year experience, he amassed such popularity across the state. Sununu is a recognizable name. His father had been in New Hampshire politics for decades, quite frankly. And to see Chris Sununu being this popular governor who was able to outperform Trump significantly, outperform any Republican who ran in conjunction with him in 2020, 2018, and 2016, that he would run for Senate. He had the perfect opportunity. Maggie Hassan was a vulnerable Democrat, yet he announced that he was not going to run for Senate and instead was going to focus on the governorship. Well, if he's up by 48, people began to see this as, Chris Sununu could very well run for Senate and win easily. He would not even have a close or competitive race. I would counter that by saying, at least think about it for a moment. New Hampshire still would be a state that the Democratic Party would fight for, and they have an incumbent in, and it isn't exactly as easy to transition gubernatorial candidates to Senate elections. A lot of the more localized and popular issues for New Hampshire residents won't exactly be the same things that they care about when it comes down to the national level, who's representing them in Congress, who's making up the balance of power. I think when you start to nationalize Chris Sununu, he becomes less popular, just for obvious reason, and I think also that's maybe something that he wanted to avoid. If you look at former Senate polls in the state of New Hampshire, you will find that in 2022, Maggie Hassan would only lose routinely to one Republican, and that was Chris Sununu. I mean, you take a look at all of the other polls, Maggie Hassan defeats quite literally every other Republican, including the former Senator Kelly Ayotte. She defeats every other Republican except for Chris Sununu. And like I said, when you nationalize Republicans, they become less popular in states that they won their elections in based off of popularity when you're talking about more localized and statewide offices. In this case, the governorship. Because while Chris Sununu is up 48 points against a potential Democrat, he's only up by 6 against Maggie Hassan, or 2, or 1, or 8, or 3, or 5. And that's it. So he probably saw this as potentially him losing support that he could otherwise take to his advantage in the future. But I will say, it probably was one of the biggest fails for the Republican Party when they could not recruit Chris Sununu. Because looking at Maggie Hassan defeated every other Republican, sort of put it in the hands of Chris Sununu and said, hey, do you want this? Take it. It's there for you. I mean, you're defeating her in the polls. You're a popular governor. No one is saying you're going to lose. Yet he said, I don't want it. I don't think this is fun. I've talked to senators. They tell me that they don't enjoy their jobs. Why would I do that? I enjoy what I do right now. And the Democratic Party, I'm sure, was furious. More so with him. I've seen people on social media and in news outlets call him selfish, attack him for not making this decision. Quite frankly, I don't blame him for not wanting to be in Washington, D.C. I think while some people might like the political aspirations of it, it's clear that Sununu, at least momentarily, does not want that for himself. I would also like to say that these recent polls sort of indicate that Maggie Hassan isn't exactly solid because Sununu decided that he wasn't going to run. She might be in a significantly better of a position, but we can't forget that on the generic ballot, the Republicans are up. That on the Joe Biden numbers, the Republican Party is benefiting from this. Biden is down 11 points nationwide and has maintained that for months. The last election that Maggie Hassan ran in, she won by 0.1%. The signs are telling us that New Hampshire very well has the possibility of going red. Sununu simply would have made it much more solid. But it's not out of the question for her to lose again in 2022. Lose for the first time in this Senate election. Looking at the numbers, amongst registered voters, Maggie Hassan wins by 6 and 15 points. Chuck Morse is the Republican minority leader in the New Hampshire Senate, majority leader in the New Hampshire Senate. Doug Bolduc, I believe, is a veteran and a businessman, one or the other. He currently was the only Republican, at least mildly recognizable, that was running for Senate until Chuck Morse entered into the race. But looking at the numbers here, it's clear that Maggie Hassan does better against one than the other. But the point being that amongst registered voters, she defeats them by 6 and 15 points. Amongst adults, meaning a more broad electorate, meaning people who might be otherwise upset with President Biden, but aren't registered, aren't out there ready to vote just yet, but could very well get excited enough to, as we saw with the Tea Party and we saw with Republicans in 2014. Amongst adults, Maggie Hassan only wins by 3 points and 6 points. I mean, you're talking about a reduction of a 15-point lead down to 6. A 6-point lead cut in half amongst the other candidate. What you're finding is that Maggie Hassan is very much vulnerable. Amongst adults, she is polling less than 50%, 43 and 45. That's not a good sign. When she's at 51 and 54, that is a good sign. I would also like to say that when you take a look at the polling data from St. Anselm College, you find that, you're looking at Maggie Hassan up by 5 points, 10 points, 7 points. That's in a better position, but again, amongst registered voters. I think adults provide an interesting perspective because this isn't the exact sample that you might otherwise expect when it comes down to New Hampshire. It's a high turnout state, a high registered voter state, but I will say that there are voters out there that typically don't vote that might be enraged by, let's say, the high gas prices, enraged by inflation, enraged by the response to Afghanistan, Ukraine, the coronavirus, whatever it might be. People who are adults in our nation that are a part of our electorate but are not registered to vote just yet. And those people could be the sleeper voters, where you might be seeing internal polls and external polls missing it unless they actually get in the demographic group. Because I think there's a reason why the registered voters numbers from Phillips Academy matches the same ones from St. Anselm College and even the, Trafalgar group, yet don't seem to match the numbers. Don't seem to match the numbers when it comes down to adults. The adult numbers don't match because I think you're talking about a very different portion of the electorate. Not super significantly different because New Hampshire, again, is a high turnout, high registered state. But I will say that there is probably a little bit more of a reason to explore that than simply looking at registered voters. But I will say, but by the time we reach the election and you're seeing significantly big differences between registered voters and adults, there might be either a discrepancy in the registered voters group that they have to poll, or it might just not be enough time to register and get out to vote in this election. And those are just people that are disgruntled with government but will still never vote at the end of the day. That's a very real possibility. But my main takeaway from this and these polls that have just come out of the state of New Hampshire is that we are looking at numbers that tell us that Maggie Hassan is up and Sununu is down. It's surprising on one end because I will say that I'm not expecting Maggie Hassan to win by 15 points, by 6 points. I think a 3-point victory is much more likely, but we don't really have much data. Again, the polls beyond St. Anselm College go all the way back to before the 2022 election year. So we really are looking at very infrequent and very, minute amounts of data at any given point in time. New Hampshire is, though, going to be an extremely competitive race. I think the governor election is set in stone. We know how that's going to go. My projection has never changed from, safe Republican. The only time that I actually do want to clarify this, the only time it was lean R was when I thought Sununu was going to run for Senate when it made sense in terms of convenience, in terms of electability, but he decided against it. And from then on, it's been safe Republican. But, looking at the Cook Political Report, looking at other election insiders, they say New Hampshire is going safe bread on the governor level, but in terms of the Senate level, I think I also agree with what some of these polls are telling us, but I don't think it's going to be a 15-point victory or even a 6-point victory. At the end of the day, New Hampshire is still a competitive state, but I think that these deferring results should not shock anyone for a very obvious reason, looking at New Hampshire historically and even in the last election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.